Hi, welcome back to Spirit Lounge. Hope you guys are doing really well. And to the next installment of the Upanisads. I have actually written all of them up now, so I'm going to be doing them back to back over today. Hopefully I finish them today or finish them tomorrow. But tomorrow will be the final installment of this. So I'm going to be moving on to the Bible after this, so look forward to that. So let's just jump straight into this one. Okay, here we go. So this one is the Maitri Upanisad, and if I just jump onto that there. So again, the Upanisads were written by various ascetic sages who went into forests and other places of seclusion and reclusion to discover the divine Godhead, in other words. And these are their perceptions, which were articulated using language, using metaphor, using symbolism, using aspects of our body, environment, and cosmic realities to explain what they were perceiving. And the way it's written is indicative of the period of its time with regards to family, cattle, owning livestock, things like that. So when we read something as old as the Upanisads, the Vedas were written 1200 to 400 BC. It's a very different language, and we've experienced that a lot up to this point. So as we go through this, keep that in mind. But remember, the message is actually very much the same, and I'll summarize that at the end. Okay, the Maitri Upanisad, associated to the Yajur Veda, so they are all of the Upanisads have some link to one or more of the Vedas with regards to what they discuss. They may be associated with prayers, they may be associated with ritual sacrifices, they could be associated with other aspects of what the Vedas are actually talking about. And this one talks about the Brahma, the creator, Visnu, Siva, the transformer. These are the three main, I talk about the forces within this universe, which is creation, preservation, transformation, or destruction. And the three Gunas, which are independent qualities, which are purity, activity, and darkness, which we have to move through. And the comment here was the whole universe can be divided into two main categories of elements. This is Maya and illusion, and then Purusha, which is the divine reality. Okay, meditation on the self, effervescence of the world. A sacrifice to Brahman is laying of sacrificial fires of ancients. So this is where there's always the sacrifices in the Vedas always talk about sacrificial fires. The fires is very, very prevalent because with Agni being the deity of fire, it's the creative force of manifestation. So fires are lit and then sacrifices are thrown into those. They are butter. This could be milk, this could be rice, this could be other aspects that are thrown into fire, sacrifice, and then doing ritualistic chanting, prayers, and other things around the fire. Many, many Hindu and Vedic rituals are around fire as a central focus. The ancients, fires of ancients, these are the deities and gods which represent the various aspects, very, very similar to the Nagamadi. The Nagamadi have exactly the same breakdown as this, and I'll demonstrate this at the end. Having laid these fires, remember the Nagamadi was written 250 AD, and talking about 1,500 years, things haven't really changed. So the point of my channel is to show you that the simple message exists in all of them, but they're all the same. They're saying the same things, but in a different way. Language changes depending on the period it was written. Keep that in mind. Okay, having laid these fires, meditate on the self. Does the sacrifice become complete and flawless? Who is he that we meditate upon? Is called life. Rama is a philosopher. And a teacher said, Upanisads are there to show that ceremonial works insofar as they contribute to produce the knowledge of the Supreme. So in other words, what this is basically saying, Rama Tirtha is a teacher, philosopher, in saying that ceremonial works are only there to assist in the acquisition of knowledge of the divine. They are not in so much avenues to it on their own. They're just supplementary to actually study of scriptural text. So that the sacrificial things are activities that you do in parallel to those things to achieve knowledge of the divine. In my respect, you don't need to do any sacrifice or any of these activities at all. You need to evolve the internal church and study scripture if that's what you're lent to do. But actually, you don't really need to. You open up your internal church to the divine, and you truly open it up to that and ask for knowledge to be unveiled unto you from within. You will find that. And you'll be drawn to scripture, you'll be drawn to books, you'll be drawn to people and places where knowledge and information will be cascaded to you from those places also. So you can be an intentional decision from the self to do that, or the self from within will draw you to what you need in your progression forward into elevated states of knowledge and perception and frequency and state. This body is non-eternal. Have a state of non-attachment. King Brahma went into the forest and performed extreme austerity, gazing at the sun for 1,000 days. He came to Sakyana, who is the seer. Brother Arthur is the student at this point. Sakyana said, "Choose a boon," he said. "I know not the self, Sakyana." Sakyana, this is, and he's always saying, choose a boon, choose a wish, and he's asked, "I know not the self, teach me the self." Sakyana states, this is a very difficult question. Choose other desires. Touching his feet, this body is afflicted by desire. What is the good of the enjoyment of desires? For he who has fed on them is seen to return to this world. So this is a very interesting statement. He's saying that he's already been engulfed by desire in his life already. Desire, wealth, sexual, physical, mental, emotional, desire-driven aspects of whatever that might be, is why he's come to Sakyana for elevation. He hasn't come for more desires. He's come for elevation beyond those desires. And he's saying that those attached to desires return to this world, which they do because you turn to this world because your attachment to the things of this world, to the perceptions of this world. Your state of consciousness is not aligned away from this world. This is what brings you here. It's not lessons. The lessons really are the attachments. But we don't have lessons. We're here because we draw ourselves back here. Deliver me, sir. You are our way of deliverance. You are our way to knowledge. And it says everything in this world is transient. It rises, it grows, it decays and dies. So it's a cycle. Okay. Sakyana's teaching concerning the self. Sakyana is the sage and the guru that these students are with. It says, attain your purpose and become a knower of the self. And it says, self is different from the composite body, senses, mind, and understanding, and life. It's true. All of these things are physical, material aspects of being, physical being, emotional being, sensing being. But the self is the infinite being within, so it's very different. He goes upwards, moving, yet unmoving. He dispels darkness. He is the self, that serene one within. Rising up out of this body reaches the highest light. His own form is the self, the immortal, the fearless, that is Brahman. This is Brahman knowledge contained in all the Upanisads. So in other words, it's stating the achieving your path to achieving yourself and attaching and realigning with the divine spark, the breath of our source, the all, not the false gods that we've created. The all, the only true one, is within us, and to do that we need to divine ourselves towards it through knowledge. This is offered up in the Upanisads and of course many other scriptures. I will narrate it to you. This body is like a cart without intelligence. Ourselves, we need to elevate intelligence or bring intelligence to us. We are an empty cart. What sensuous beings belongs at such power have been made intelligent. He who is reputed as standing aloof amidst, this is aloof, away, amidst in the within. This is your spirit again. like those qualities, like those of vigorous chastity, pure, clean, void, tranquil, steadfast, abides in his own greatness. By him this body is set up as possessing intelligence. Sir, how by this kind of desireless being is this sort of thing set up? How is this one its mover? So that's some more questions sent to Sakayana. And the answer response is, he said, that subtle, ungraspable, invincible one, called a person, dwells here in the body, part of himself. So he's talking about the infinite spirit within the breath of God within us. Even a man fast asleep awakes eventually, his own volition, through his own volition. In every person is the spirit, has marks of conception, self-love. Prajapati, who is the deity of Lord of creation, called Visva, which is the all, whole, entire, universal. By him, as intelligence is in his body, set up as possessed of intelligence. Sir, how is this one its mover? He said. So he's asked another question. Prajapati is a deity, Lord of creation, then creates the universe. The being and deity above that is Visva, and by his intelligence body that we are cascaded into what is within the universe itself. Okay, the next section is progressive differentiated. If Prajapati is Prajapati into different types of being. So the creative force of Prajapati cascaded into other beings. Now this is also, there are many deities and gods and they all cascade into ourselves because they are derivative metaphors for the infinite itself. So you see this description repeated for the deities as well. In the beginning, Prajapati stood alone. He had no happiness, was being alone, meditated on himself, and created numerous offspring. This is their creating form. Saw them without understanding. Now this is very, very similar to the Nagamadi. Remember, the demiurge created human form by looking up into the waters above, which was the higher elevated realm of the divine itself, the lower realm being the illusionary realm where this manifested universe is said to be, according to the Nagamadi. And then below them, Sophia saw these bodies without, what was it? The divine breath, or in this case here it's called without understanding. And then he says, let me enter within in order to awaken. This is what Sophia did and blew the breath of spirit within every living form, which then made the demiurge not recognize Adamas. And in this case here, the breath of the creator force was blown in, made himself like the wind. He entered him, he divided himself into 5 kinds of breath. Remember the 5 breaths, internal and external, and those 3 in between, which is the diffusing breath and so forth, which is part of the yogic practice in meditation, in which we inhale, and we cascade breath out into the world, into the universe as cascading, manifesting force. This is the universal fire, the breath, within a person by which food is eaten. Now, the food is for me, knowledge, okay, in these Upanisads. It's also some passages where food is actually real food. But for the most part, when taken in context of how this is written, food is knowledge. Food is eaten, knowledge is absorbed through the person, i.e. through the infinite spirit, which when we connect to it, unveils to us that book, talking about the book of energetic pages of information cascading to us. The more we integrate with it and detach from our desire-driven human cells, which will keep us into this realm. I will say incarnation is a fact. You will all find this out. Believe it or not, it doesn't matter, because there are some realities that are real, and incarnation is one of those. People will argue about why incarnation occurs, how it occurs, but it occurs. And it's because of our attachments. Noise is that which one hears on covering the eyes. So it's talking about we cover our other senses and we hear the spirit. When a man is to depart this life, he does not hear the noise. He who consists of mind, whose body is life, having pierced these openings, he enjoys the objects by means of the 5 reins, Reins are the organs of perception. So this body is set up as possessing intelligence. On is its mover. So the mover is what? The spirit and the intelligence, the knowing, the knowledge which enters, moves us through with our yogic and meditative breath, which is always talking about meditating, prayer, calming the breath, concentrating on the 5 states of breath, and so on so forth to move forward. So it says here, so prana is the intake, inspiration, propulsion, and forward movement. In other words, it's force. The apana is the elimination, downwards and outward movement. Samana is the assimilation, discernment, inner absorption and consolidation. Udana is growth, speech, expression, ascension, upward movement. And Vayana is a circulation on all levels, expansiveness and pervasiveness. This is what this is what this passage talks about. It goes through all these 5 aspects and says this is what we are to understand and start to practice. Okay, this self, the seers declare, wanders here on earth in every body, in a physical body, by the light or the dark fruits of action. This unmanifestedness, imperceptibility, freedom from self-sense, the self is unabiding, free from desire. He covers himself with the veil made of qualities, and these are the qualities we've just talked about above here, including the breath, the fire, the spirit, the knowledge, and so forth. There are many, many qualities and many, many vehicles through which in the Upanisads we absorb the divine, and we'll cover this in the summary at the end of this series. Okay, the great self and the individual soul. Now, remember what I've constantly harped on about is there's no difference between the infinite self and the soul. It's an intellectual separation, but there also is a difference. So before we talk about this, I'll repeat it again, and I'll keep repeating it on every video that I do for however long this channel exists. We do have a divine spirit, we all know this. It's the breath of the divine that was in us. This is what animates our body, keeps us, houses our awareness internally. We can ignore that, or we can join to it, or we can be indifferent to it. It matters not. That's a choice we make in our lives. It's free will. There are consequences to those choices, remember. And leaving it and being indifferent to it and ignoring it, atheism is just an illusion. You'll attach to this world through ego, intelligence, virtue signaling, self-righteous, doing good. Good, see how good I am, the reflection in the mirror. This will keep you here. But the infinite spirit exists. Now, above this, beyond this, external to ourselves, which comes forward, more expressive in our external being, is what we would call our soul selves. The soul self is a combination, the consolidation of the choices we've made and the expression and the direction in which we're taking our energetic force. Now, that energetic force can be aligned with our divineness within, or it can be going to a million other different directions of energetic force. This is the soul expression. Your soul is your expressionable self that lies between your infinite being and your ego self. It depends which way you're going to move your soul self. Your soul self is your expressive self. It exists because you manifest it. And this is what's called by selling the soul to the devil or not. It's a common saying, and it's true. What is selling your soul to the devil? It means that you've cascaded and you've given your perceptions, one has made a conscious decision to take one's life down a certain direction, a certain path, which brings in certain actions, words, thoughts, and intentions which are either that are only for self-service, that are for the detriment of all others, and also in some cases includes some very perverse and very depraved acts towards others. This is selling the soul to the devil. This is selling one's soul to false gods and deities that exist in this universal realm. They exist within the astral. That is what's calling selling the soul. You can never sell your divine spirit. I have to make this very, very clear. You can never sell it. This always belongs to grace. But it's your soul expression that keeps you here, not your spirit. Your soul expression that keeps you here. Is your soul expression moving towards your divine inner grace or not? This is important to remember. So this is where the soul comes in, and the great self is the spirit. This makes the distinction, because from that respect there is a distinction. For me, there is no distinction, because for me I only look to go towards my great self. Because as long as I do that, then the expression of my soul is in alignment with it. I do not worry about my soul, my expressive self. I try to move it towards my expressive self, towards my divine self at all times. We all make stumbles. We all have stumbles, we make mistakes, we all do wrong things. We're not here to be perfect, we're just here to evolve enough out of here. But through doing that, it's implicit, it's implied that your soul will follow. So don't worry about the individual soul, is my advice. Move towards the infinite spirit. Move towards connecting yourself through your internal church. Develop this church and your connection back to the God, back to the divine, call it whatever you like. But that's where you need to move, and that will be your release. Moksha, in this case, autogenese, which is in the Nagamadi, is the release from this realm of rebirth. Both talk about the same thing. If you watch my entire series, Upanishad series and the Nagamadi, you'll see this. Okay, I've gone off on a tangent. I'll get back onto the book. Okay, the great self and the individual soul. Indeed, another elemental self. There is indeed another, and an elemental self enters a good or an evil womb. This is a choice. This is the soul expression. Remember, the good or evil womb is a choice. It's your soul expression. What womb is it going? The soul is the womb of the infinite self. You can either put it in, you can put the soul, you can put the infinite self into you can ignore it, or you can develop an evil womb, if you like, for the infinite individual soul. The course is downward or upward. There are 5 gross elements. They are called space, which is called the ether, the air, fire, water, and earth, and it is called the body. These are aspects of the physical. Its immortal self is like a drop of water on the lotus leaf. It's affected by nature's qualities. He gets bewildered, he sees not, full of desire, defiled by streams of qualities. So this is talking about the individual soul. This is what I've just described. It's like being afflicted by nature's qualities. Are we afflicted? It's a choice, if we are or if we're not. Then he said to them, he who is the doer is the elemental self. The individual soul, what I would call the doer, the elemental self, the body self. The elemental self overcome by the inner person. The person is not overcome. The person is talking about the spirit here. It's a 4-fold coverings of matter, life, consciousness, and intelligence, which are outside of the infinite spirit. There's our material selves, our life experience, our state of consciousness, which we all have, our auric senses, and the intelligence. This is mind, ego, material, human intelligence, and then there's also divine intelligence. When we go towards the spirit, we attain divine intelligence. When we go towards the spirit, we attain divine expanded consciousness, unabated consciousness, unrestricted consciousness, which takes us out into the real realms. And we end up in a divine life, and we move away from our attachment to matter. The reverse happens. Okay, it has been said elsewhere, fear, depression, ignorance, jealousy, these are the characteristics of the quality of darkness. Self-explanatory there. Passion, covetousness, hurting. Covetousness means being coveting another person's wife, coveting another person's things, being, things like that. Hatred, deceit, envy, qualities of passion. Okay. Next chapter, the union of the elemental self and the supreme self. Sir, you are our deliverance. This is the student talking to the seer. What is the method by which this elemental self, after leaving this body, obtains union with the true self? Well, I would say the elemental self does not achieve union with the true self when leaving the body. It has to achieve union with it whilst it's in the body. That's what this life is about. But we'll continue. He said, like waves, there is no turning back. Objects of sound and touch are worthless objects for a man. The antidote is knowledge of the Vedas, or any scripture. Duty, i.e. ceremonial acts, like branches, go upwards and they also go downwards. By austerity, goodness is obtained. From goodness, understanding is obtained. It is reached. Understanding is the self. In the self is the self obtained. Understanding is the self. This basically is divine knowledge. Is the divine self obtained. Who obtains the self does not return. This is again talking about release from rebirth. All of the Vedic texts are talking about moving you towards removing yourself from the reincarnational cycle, and there's a reason for that. It's extending our perceptions towards the divine. There is only that. Everything else is an illusion. Everything else is a manifestation in this universe. We are here to evolve beyond not just humanity or this earth. It's actually this universe itself, because that's where we will go. That's the purpose. We need to meld back into the void of the all. How many of us in our soul quality, our soul expression, can say that's where we are? Really? The answer is in the mirror. Knowledge, austerity, and meditation. And this is talking, this whole Vedic and the Nagamati is asking us to go on the journey within the internal church. It's a difficult decision to make because many people don't make it, can't make it, and unwilling to because it scares them too much. Maybe not in this lifetime, maybe another. Knowledge, austerity, and meditation. Knowledge is the door to Brahman, divine knowledge. You've freed himself from evil. Om is the manifest greatness of Brahman. Remember, they talked about Om being the sound of the universe, the A, U, and the M representing aspects of that. Always meditate on it. Om, the practice of saying Om or listening to that, or just meditating anyway and understanding the word Om, if it has meaning to you. Remember, all symbols, if they're approached with the divine infinite spirit, they all have the same essence. Brahman is apprehended, becomes one and goes. The one becomes one and goes beyond Brahman to the lower Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is the creative force, the creator of the universe, the creator of Prajapati, for example, to the state of supreme divinity. So you're going through the levels, and I'm going to summarize those in the last video of this series. And you go above the deities, the gods, in other words, the deities that are created. Obtains happiness and is free from sickness and unaffected. And this is basically talking about release from rebirth, in other words. Okay, worship of various gods permissible. Worship of various gods permissible, but their rewards are temporary. So this is an interesting heading on its own. Worship temporary illusionary gods. What do we get out of that, really? They're allowed in the Vedas, but it's stating here that they are of temporary benefit, because we really need to move ourselves to the one and only thing that exists. That is true. Okay, fire, air, sun, time, breath, food, Brahma, Rudra, Vishnu. These are the Rudras are the ceremonial acts, practices, actions. Vishnu, Brahman, and Siva, remember, are the three forces: creation, preservation, destruction. Which one is the best for us? These are, and the answer is, these are but the chief forms of the supreme. In other words, expressions, metaphors to break down something that is so great for humanity to understand. We break it down into smaller aspects so we can understand the whole. This is what deities, gods, demigods, other aspects that represent things, gods we've given to things, are for, to help us understand. To help us understand. Remember, thousands of years later, we still read these texts. Why? Because we don't understand. And we need to go back to these ancient texts to help us understand yet again. So these texts will traverse time immemorial. They will continue on, because humanity is not learning anything from current life. There's no evolutionary text which is written after the Bible, after the Buddhist text, after the Upanisads, after all of the others, because they're just passed down and we're supposed to learn from them. because the information, the truth was given back then. We're still using it now, and we'll continue to use it 2, 3, 4,000, 10,000 years from now. These are but the chief forms of the Supreme. To whichever one man is devoted here in his world, will he rejoices. So in other words, this is talking about whatever you're attached to, that'll be your realm of experience, and that'll be your realm of desire and joy. When one meditates upon, with these one moves higher. In other words, when you meditate upon even these demigods, you'll move higher. When all things perish, you move beyond. In other words, so if you're devoted to the material, that's what you're rejoicing. If you're devoted to idols, some demigods, then you rejoice with whatever those will bring. They'll bring some progression to you, what this is saying, but they will not move you beyond. When you move beyond, you move to moksha, which is when all things perish. This is when you go to the internal church, which is the only passage, by the way, is the internal church. The concept of Trimurti. Okay, in the beginning, this world was darkness alone. That was in the highest, impelled, and it moves on to differentiation. So I've talked many times, and I have a video which I didn't release actually, which talks about what's in the afterlife, and I'm thinking of redoing that video at some point. And it's because I did talk about in the beginning the world was darkness alone. Well, the entire realm of manifestation is just a void. It's darkness, not darkness in terms of evil, sadness, low energy or depression. It's just an emptiness. But it's an emptiness which within it exists absolute love and grace. It's just is. It just exists. It's just sense, it's energy, it's feeling, it's emotional, things you cannot touch. And our infinite grace, which is just a light, dispels into this emptiness, which contains within itself all possibility of creation, preservation, destruction, and probability. From that, which is the divine itself, is which we will meld into where we're trying to go back into from our soulful selves and merge back into this after our lives are over, and remove all attachment which keep us bound to this realm. And that is where the divine thought into expression everything we see. All the forces that we measure, all the aspects that we associate with demigods and gods and deities. This is an expression of thought, just putting the simple forces of manifested energy through thought and intention, cascade and bring differentiation, using the forces of creation, preservation, destruction, and karma, and energy, transmuting itself through motion, through the speed through which it traverses, or then the senses through which it's perceived, into form and experience, and it's created the basis in which all creation exists. It's just allowed to be. Remember, all things are conscious, all things are aware of themselves, and they interact, everything's connected, nothing is separate. It creates, it manifests, and then form manifests, intellect manifests. We create things through our own manifested thought in our own lives, through manifestation. This is we as above, so below. And this is what this is saying. In this world was darkness alone. That was in the highest being the supreme. Impelled, and it moves on to differentiation, means form was created, difference, aspects, life. The basis of physical manifestation in all the spectrums of light. Remember, we are in a tiny pinprick. We only have a tiny pinprick of light expression. The light expression is enormous. We see and perceive literally nothing in these bodies. But we can perceive the all if we move away and out of these bodies whilst in them, through consciousness. The intelligence principle is in every person, is the knower of the body, marks of conception, determination and self-love. Prajapati called Visva, part of him which is darkness. So Visva was the universe, Prajapati called him, created it. The universe, part of him is darkness, so there's a darker realm within it. And the sacred knowledge is this Rudra, i.e. actions, rituals, ceremonies. Students of sacred knowledge is Vishnu. This is the self within and without, within and without. So this is the self that's within, but also without, because it's in the divine. We are of the divine. So 8 forms of 5 breaths, which remember there are the pranas, which are the 5 breaths. Then you have the elements, which are the sun, moon, and the stars, and the 5 elements. And the 11-fold are the 11 organs of sense, action, and mind. So these are the hands, the feet, and all this kind of thing, the nose, and so forth. I'll go through these in the summary chapter. The one thing about the Upanisads, they use so many aspects of our body, our environment, the natural forces, and the cosmic bodies to express things, and they're all bundled up into 8 forms, 11-fold, 10-fold, 21-fold, and they're all aspects of things. And we'll go through some of those, the ones that are more, the main ones in the summary chapter. Okay, inward breath and outward sun, correlated manifestations of the self. The self bears himself in 2 ways, breath and he who is in the sun. Now the breath is within us, the aspects of breath, that he who is in the sun, i.e. the giver of light. The sun is a metaphor for light. It was also associated with Jesus, the sun, the rising sun, the giver of light. These are all metaphors which were associated with Jesus. Jesus did exist. Many people say didn't. For me, in my heart, yes, he did. He was a messenger for us. We've kind of forgotten this message, I think. But he was also associated and said that it didn't exist because what the rising sun was really the sun rising in the sky. This is also a true metaphor. These paths, inward and outward. Sun is the outer self. The inner self is the breath. The course of inner self is measured by the course of the outer self. This is true. The outer self must come towards the inner self. The outer self, or the soul expression of our being, must align and start to resonate towards the divine spirit within. So it's the outer expression must move towards the inner expression, which is always divine. Who is freed from evil? The overseer of the senses is pure-minded. That golden person who is within the sun, the light, looks upon the earth from his golden place. These 2, breath and sun, move near each other. Let him reverence them with the syllable Om. What is this? The breath moves towards the light is within, the sun is the light, the rising sun, the rising spirit. The breath is the pranic breath in which we move in and out of through meditation, practice, silence, tranquility, contemplation, that moves as our soul towards our spirit. This is what this entire thing is saying. The mystic Om. 2 forms of Brahman, formed and fearless. Formless is the real. That is the Brahman. The light is the sun. We've just talked about this. That came to have Om as itself, the sound of the universe. One should meditate on the sun as Om and get united with it. The syllable is holy, is supreme. Om is the sound form of the self, the infinite self. The fires are the mouth form. The earth, atmosphere. The earth is the mouth, the fires. The mouth form. The fires are the mouth. The fires are the mouth form. The atmosphere is the sky. The world form is food. Water is the moon. And the growth form is the prana, breath. And the Om is the higher and the lower Brahman. So it's just associating again aspects of things to aspects of grace. The explanation of the 3 worlds. There's another section. Lord of creation uttered Bhuva Sava is Prajapati's gross form. So these are chants, words within chants and rituals and prayers. Prajapati is Prajapati's gross form. So this is the creative form. The head is the sky, her navel is the atmosphere, and the feet is the earth, the eye is the sun. Prajapati in all of this, Prajapati in it all, this is the hidden. In this world, in this whole world, one should reverence. So these are basically talking about the creative force, which in this case is the deity Prajapati. is manifest in everything. Okay, worship of the sun by means of Savitri prayer. One desirous of self, expounders of Brahman knowledge, which is the seeker, is meditate on the splendor of the god Savitri, which is the sun god, which is the light, the rising sun, the giver of light, the sun which is the nurturer of life. Hence why the sun is associated with this. Illuminates our thought. Remember, illuminate also, the words are important. The sun gives light. It illuminates, it shines upon. Okay? Remember the metaphor of these things. Illuminati just means those who are illumined, who can see. In other words, hidden knowledge, illumined, to be illuminated. Illuminate our thoughts. We all have access to this, by the way. This is not a secret for the few. We have just decided to be ignorant and not allow ourselves to understand the greater truth, which, remember, the force of the universe, of the divine itself, allows us to use its grace for whatever purposes we intend, good or bad. Grace in itself is just pure grace, and that word means love. Whether we use the forces of this universal grace to express love is up to us, or if we use it to express immense darkness and depravity and perversion and evil, it's also up to us. Both exist in the truest form in this world and in this universe. Make no mistake about that. And it's practiced around us as we speak. Okay, illuminate our thoughts. He who is hidden in yonder sun, in the pupil in the eye, we see the light. His course is within the rays of light, or he is Rudra. The self of oneself is called the leader, all-pervader. Knowledge is of a dual nature. It's true, light. We can have positive or light, negative or perversion, darkness, evil. A subject which knows, an object which is known. In other words, we know ourselves. This self is the Lord, the real, the terrible. Well, there isn't a terrible. I don't know why it says terrible, but I pull that out. There is no divine grace which is terrible. If there is a God that one worships, that demands that you worship it, that demands your subservience, demands your sacrifices, demands that you say how much you love it and revere it, it is not the divine. It is something else that has been manifested, that has been created by us, that we are mistakenly worshipping as the divine. The divine, I know, requests nothing from us other than to come to it and to understand it and reveal it to ourselves. Everything else is an illusion, an abstraction, an obfuscation, and I don't entertain any of it. Lord of creation, Lord of all, the golden germ, and that is Hiranyagarbha, which is the golden germ, the germ which the egg which manifested life. Prajapati, in other words. There's many, many gods, remember. Narayana, the moon, who gives forth heat, should be sought after, given fearlessness to all creatures. Put aside objects of sense and comprehend the self, who has all forms, the golden one, the final goal, and is the light only. Okay, eating of food, a sacrificial act. Now we'll determine whether this is food in knowledge or food as in food. Okay. He who knows that has both these breath and sun sacrifices only to his self, mind absorbed in practice. Purify the impurity of mind. First the breath, the first breath, the 5 invocations of breath, the pranic breaths. Meditate on the self with breath and fire. Thou art all. That is born is supporting by thee. All oblations enter into thee. So the oblations into fire are those given to the self through the practice of throwing oblations or offerings into the fire. So who eats comes not again into the conditions of food, need for knowledge, in other words. So here food again is knowledge. Okay, this is a very long chapter, so I'm going to keep continuing on here and get us through this because it's a very, very long chapter. Purusha and Prakriti. There is nothing else to be known. The conscious person abides with nature. Enjoyer, for he enjoys feeds on the food. The elemental self is food for him. In other words, the material matter things are food for the elemental person. The world is indeed the food, called pleasure, pain, and delusion. There is no apprehension of taste of the seed, or in other words, the internal cause, so long as there is no production of effect. Nature moves to the state of becoming manifest. There arises the perception of it. The 5 objects of sense for tasting of them. Manifest is food and unmanifest is food. So there's talking about here that the apprehension of the seed is once we apprehend the seed within, then there is a production of an effect that comes from that elevation or movement. We can even move to the layers of perception or becoming manifest to layers of perception. All the manifestation can be food in terms of material things, or unmanifest can be a food which is the non-material things. The elemental self, which is the matter self, is called Soma, i.e. the moon. The Soma is another name for the moon. Unmanifest, as his mouth, is called Agni, the fire. Fire force, the creative force of the universe. A renouncer, a contemplator, performer of the self-sacrifice. Okay, food as the form of self. Food is the highest form of self. Life consists of food. One does not eat. When one does not eat, he becomes a non-thinker. This is knowledge. Non-hearer, non-toucher, non-seer. Let's go of his vital breath. It is said, one eats, he becomes full of life. This is knowledge again. It becomes a thinker, a hearer, a seer. From food, i.e. knowledge, creatures dwell on earth. By food they live, and again into it they finally pass. So this is talking about through knowledge or the lack of knowledge we recursively incarnate. We pass back in, but we pass out. Being said that born of the blessed Visnu, called the all-supporting food creative force. Remember, Brahma is a creative force, the preserver. Vishnu, Siva, the destroyer. Food, life, mind of life, bliss of understanding. He who knows becomes possessed of food. In other words, enlightened. Okay, the importance of time. As many parts of time as there are, though the yonder sun moves. He who worships time as Brahma from time moves away very far. So in other words, practices and embarks upon the journey of the course of linear time. From all time beings flow. From time they advance to grow. In time they obtain rest. Rest, remember, just like in the Nagamadi, they attain rest in the divine or into grace. They disappear. Time is formed and is also formless. The further we move away from the material realm in our consciousness and our understanding of the reality, time becomes formless. It becomes irrelevant. It becomes meaningless, because there is no time as we move out into the greater realms of not just the universe, actually, into the edges of the universe, but also into the divine reality where there is no time. 2 forms. Remember, time is an aspect of our physical creation. How we see things, how we measure things in our physical world. 2 forms of Brahma, time and timelessness. Prior to the sun is time, timeless. That which begins, the sun is time. The year is Prajapati, is time, is food, is the abode of Brahma, is the self. Time ripe, so it's basically saying, once you drop into matter, where the sun exists in the universal realm, time starts to exist. But in the timelessness space, the abode of Brahma is the self. Time ripens all things. Non-time is without parts, other words, divine. Incarnate time is the great ocean of creatures, i.e. form and aspects, sun, moon, stars, planets, and year and rest. Comes this whole world of good or evil. In the beginning this world was Brahman, the infinite one, not to be reasoned about. In other words, we cannot intellectually go towards grace. We have to go towards grace from within. It's unthinkable. At dissolution, he alone remains. This means once we achieve moksha, all that is left is our integration back into the void. From that space he awakens this world. Luminous form, in other words, from that space the void, the divine awakens, i.e. starts to manifest through thought and intention and projected energy. Creates the forces of creative force, the universe. Luminous form which gives heat in the yonder sun and is smokeless. Okay, the yoga method. A rule for achieving this oneness is the control of breath. Withdrawal of the senses into meditation and concentration. The sage shaking off good and evil. So this is how the sage or the seer or the ascetic goes into quiet seclusion, reclusion, and practices meditation, contemplation, and shakes off good and evil or the attachments to things, and everything goes into oneness. The knower has restrained his mind from the external. Let the breathing spirit merge his breathing into his breathing spirit. Let the breathing spirit merge his breathing spirit in what is called the fourth condition, which is going beyond the third dimensional parts of us, which are matter selves. We go into a fourth condition of spirit, our divine selves, which is non-thought, the highest, the hidden. Will this living being be without support and attachment? I think that explains itself there. We talked about that. So the yogic practices outside of just Western yoga where people just go to stretch, which is, I do it just for physical things. Your real yogic practice is what we've just talked about, we've just read. It's about contemplation, silence, and moving towards divine. And those bodily movements are expressions of release, of cleansing the body as well, so therefore the mind is still. And that's what real yogic practice is, but its real purpose is to move you towards divine, not to be, flexible and doing funky moves on a mat. But that's what real yoga is truly about. Okay, the free spirit. Having passed beyond the elements, the senses and the objects of sense, consists of freedom from self-conceit. The fire guardian of the door of Brahman, i.e. the Agni, the deity, who has bewilderment as his crown. The crown chakra is here. The spiritual eye chakra is there. The crown chakra is through which we connect, and our spiritual eye is which we see. And the other chakra points need to be in alignment, in frequency and balance. This is just energetic balance from within. And you'll know when your crown chakra is opening to grace. But there's also bewilderment when it's blocked. This is what this is saying. Over with the raft of the syllable Om to the other side of the space in the heart, spirit, gradually becomes manifest. Enter the hall of Brahma. Remember, Brahma is supreme absolute consciousness, henceforth being pure, clean, void, tranquil. He looks down on the wheel of births and deaths as an revolving wheel. By the practice of yoga, one gains contentment, endurance of the dualities of pleasure and pain and tranquility. He who yearns for the real becomes another. Void of expectation, is freed from fear. With mind that one hears, is a mark of liberation. One will go to the farther shore of darkness, bursting open the door of the sun. So this is basically talking about, building upon a previous passage, which is talking about yoga. The real practice of yoga is this. So yoga isn't some new age, practice for ponytailed, loose clothes wearing people, who'll just read a couple of passages in a yoga studio. It is an actual practice to take you towards your internal self, and it's part of a greater practice of your internal church. It can be used if it resonates with you. You don't have to do the yogic moves, but the yoga is a lifestyle. It's a practice. It's a passage that also can assist a person, if it resonates, towards the divine Godhead, as this is saying. If you research yoga, you'll find this. Control of thought is liberation, but just stay away from following gurus on yoga. Yoga is something you can do yourself. You can watch videos and take guidance from those who can provide it. But remember to stay within your own church. Following someone will only get you to a certain point, and we're not here to follow. Following will only get you to a certain point, but won't get you to grace itself. That passage, unfortunately, for everyone, even the guru and the seer and the sage and the rabbi, priest and pope, is an internal one. Control of thought is liberation. The bird of golden hue abides in the heart and in the sun. This is talking about the spirit. A diver bird, a swan of surpassing radiance. We meditated upon him. Mind which seeks the truth has quieted down in its own place. Silence in meditative practice or yogic practice. One's own thought, contemplation. Let a man cleanse it by effort. Go on the journey and start the passage. What a man thinks, that he becomes. Serenity of one's thought, one destroys all actions, good or bad. Dwelling within. The serene self enjoys imperishable happiness. Mind. The mind is of two kinds, pure and impure. Freeing mind from sloth, making it motionless, i.e. continual chatter. Slowly, we can calm the mind. Till it reaches its end, by concentration, has entered the self. Mind is the cause of bondage and liberation of mankind. Ego. This is what this is saying. The ego creates egocentric minds of self-virtue, self-righteousness, and goodness, expressed goodness. This is the cause of bondage. The dropping of self-virtue, dropping of self-righteousness, dropping of goodness, dropping of I know. We know nothing. And opening yourself to the divine to bring you to grace is liberation. This is two aspects of mind. Ego mind or liberated mind of mankind. He who sees concentration, he who sees him sees all. Rising in the midst of the sun becomes the two light rays. The ocean light, they who arise forth, the light within the clouds is the highest sky. Entrance into the lights. The sun is used as a metaphor here. We move towards the sun and the radiance of the light coming from the sun being the metaphor for the God, for the grace, which is probably what it was thought of at the time. Space is the support. The other is unbounding. Food here is the support, knowledge. The two selves are the witness and the experiencing self, the one that witnesses things silently in meditative practice and the unveiling of the spiritual force. The other one is experiencing the senses. Remember, those come to the external senses. This is experiencing self. The former is tranquil and the latter is full of activity. One should meditate with the symbol Om. This is a great passage. I really like this one because it summarized everything perfectly. Okay, and the final slide here in this this section, the world self. The self within the heart is free from evil and is ageless, free from fetters, i.e. attachments. He is the Supreme Lord, ruler of beings. He is the determining bridge, the existent, the terrible, the Lord of creation, the golden germ. It is said that there is a grove before them. They cling to the low shrub. The world of bewilderment by doctrines that deny the self, by false comparisons and proofs that do not discern the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Gods and demons, desirous of knowing the self, went into the presence of Brahman. So I like this. Just concentrate on what it said here. Okay, he says, it is said that the grove before them, they cling on the low shrub. This is talking about human nature clinging to the lowest state of our consciousness, into bewilderment through doctrines, through religions, through following any scripture to the letter, taking it in its literal sense, taking what a rabbi, priest, pope, guru, whatever it is, standing on a podium or a chair on an elevated place telling us what is, taking that as being that and following it without discernment, without any form of self-direction. This is what this bewilderment by doctrines means, and that deny the self. Some people even deny the self. Atheism deny there is a divine self, deny there is anything beyond themselves. This is bewilderment, false comparisons, right? And not discerning between wisdom and knowledge. Remember, All passages are good. The stones across the river are different for all of us. We may move from religion to religion, or doctrine to doctrine, or scripture to scripture, or may stay on one religion for a very, very, very long time, to very, very, very many lifetimes. But eventually we'll move to another one. We'll move and step onto another stone to the other side, which is what this is saying. Keep the mind open, keep the self within, moving towards the internal church, because it will move you forward. Do not stay on the same stone. That will only keep you bound to what is available on that stone, and the knowing that is available on that stone. Okay, gods and demons, desirous of knowing the self, went to the presence of Brahman. So this is talking about a story now. So the demons and gods, the demigods, the demi-demons, went to Brahma, the Absolute, and asked, "We are desirous of knowing the self. These demons are desirous of the self, different from the true one. Very different doctrine was told to them. These deluded demons have lived their life with intense attachment, destroying the means of salvation and praising what is false." So in other words, what he's saying here, that the gods and demons went to Brahman, desirous of knowing the self, they were told, and then they took the meaning in two different ways. The gods took the meaning in terms of detachment, elevating themselves with knowledge and knowing to greater sales. The demons went the other way and attached themselves to physical things, to enjoyment, and went into praising what was false. In other words, created further astral beings and demigods and physical realms in which to immerse themselves in. Okay, so I want to say thank you very much for, remember, the second coming is you. Take these things and absorb them into yourself in contemplation, meditation. Use whatever symbols resonate with you, whatever sounds resonate with you. It's a personal passage, but keep moving from stone to stone. This is the second coming. It's your own expression. It's your own internal church. And don't just practice things just because someone says, someone directs, without understanding why you're doing them, first of all. But the spiritual journey is a transformative one. You have to become it. Remember the soul. Move it either towards the divine breath or towards something else. This is where you become. Becoming is what that is. And that only happens when you are transformative in terms of your passage, and not just activities focused. So I want to say thank you again. I'll put this back on the screen there and say thank you again for listening to this. It was very, very long. How long did that go for there? Over an hour. Okay, I'm going to cut this one off and say thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate you saying, and please share this to anyone who else would enjoy these Upanisads videos, or the Nag Hammadi, or the Bible we're going to follow, and the Buddhist text, which we're going through, many scriptures we're going to go through together. And I do appreciate your time cascading this to others, because I don't mark it, and I welcome your assistance in passing this on to those who would benefit. I want to say thank you again. And God bless to you all for listening to this and taking the time. And I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.